Okay, so can everybody see that? So the top half of the screen is showing the
Yes.
budget, and then the bottom half is the narrative. Okay.
You can't read the narrative, but you can read the budget.
So everybody should have hard copies too. And what I tried to do in your packet, you have the budget that is presented via category with a blue highlight, and then behind that is the narrative also with a blue highlight in case things get out of order in your packet. The next two items, another a budget presentation, but this one is by department or specialty, also known as function. And behind that is the narrative associated with a department, specialty / function. And then the last item is the listing of acronyms that has expanded since last budget season. So we will get started with the budget category layout. And the first items on there are salaries and benefits, which tend to be the two biggest items of our budgets. We do have a set salary schedule for the teachers. So we have gone ahead and adjusted those accordingly. The educational support personnel will be negotiated. So we've factored in a factor essentially for that, along with non-unionized staff. And I also did incorporate the new salary grid of the registered behavior technician, which is a new grouping of the educational support personnel contract. These are folks that typically would be serving in the New England Center for Children Autism program as that support staff. And there's additional trainings and certification that they can go through to bump them up into that newer salary grid range. So that has been incorporated in the budget you have before you. We also did add in the position that was added earlier this year as an interpreter, which is one of the assurances that we have by accepting federal monies. We have a list of assurances that we are providing services, and that was one of them. So we have incorporated that position into the budget. And then we have a series of requests of our administrators. So the first set are 6 paraprofessionals, and these are general education, not special education paraprofessionals that have been requested by principals of 3 of our elementary schools down here, 2 at Benel, 3 at Molly Stark, and 1 at Pownell. And they feel the staff is needed to support non-IEP learners, as well as support the safety needs in the schools and provide coverage during staff absences. These are direct assessments to the district. So Arlington wouldn't be paying, Mount Anthony wouldn't be paying, SVU ESD would be paying for these positions directly. And they have been budgeted about $37,000 each with associated benefits. Another request was to add a half-time administrative support position for the curriculum instruction and assessment department. The requirements and demands on that department are providing or serving to have an additional need for support. So we factored that in. We've also looking to transition 0.5 of the equity coordinator position. This is currently funded out of Title IV in the CFP grant, which is the Consolidated Federal Programs. That is all of our title grants. Doing this will provide greater flexibility in the job and what they can and can't do in that role. So we factored that in as well. And then also kind of along the same lines to provide greater flexibility, we've pulled the Director of Facilities Maintenance and Operations into the local budget. So that is what you're seeing there on those salaries and benefits lines, is pulling that full 1.0 into the budget for next year. And then there was finally a request to align occupational therapists with industry standards and also salaries of fellow therapists in the SU. That's probably $4,000 to $5,000 per position. So we did go ahead and factor that in as well. Another thing that's kind of swinging in the salaries is that there were a number of vacant positions in the technology department that were basically pretty close to level funding um, all of the tech budget, but we're reallocating the salaries and benefits to basically support some SU-wide initiatives, which we've already started, this year with the phone systems. We have new copiers, and I think they're looking to do network upgrades next as well. And then I just have a note on here that the ESSER funded positions will be ending at the end of next fiscal year. So those of you, on your local boards may see requests for local positions to be incorporated into those budgets for FY25. I know that Laura's got this on her radar as well, and we're looking to see how we might be able to continue funding some of those positions through other grants. So those plans are in process as we speak. But some of those positions, I think, that has been presented to you before by Laura, Melissa, and Kate. Positions such as board certified behavior analysts we have currently, family engagement specialists. We have an art therapist, licensed clinical social workers, pre-KK social emotional learning coaches, and we have a health and wellness coach as well. So the next line down is benefits. So associated with all of those salaries for our employees. Let's see if I slide this down a little bit. Sorry about that. So health insurance, currently premium increases are being reviewed by the Department of Federal Regulation of the state. They have been presented to them at the rates I have here on the screen and also on your handouts. Every tier has been suggested to have a 12% increase, with the exception of the Gold CDHP plan for next year is a 12.7% increase in the premium. And that happens to be the one plan that most folks are enrolled in. So we have gone ahead and factored that in for those folks enrolled in those plans. We also have factored in the statewide plan has a clause in it that those employees that are not paying 80%, they're not paying 20%, will have their share increased 1% per year until they reach that 20%. So we've factored that in. So we will have a change. The notice has gone out to employees for this year. Same thing's happening as of January 1 of 23. They'll be contributing 1 additional % of their premium. So it'll happen again in 24 and again in 25. And that is as far out as the statewide plan has been negotiated out through calendar year of 25. We also have incorporated any budgets associated with the positions that I had noted previously. We do know the Vermont Municipal Employees Retirement System will have an increase of 0.25%. So we have factored that in for those people that are participating and eligible for that benefit. And we just received word earlier this week from the Vermont Treasurer's office that there's an assessment that we've been paying for a number of years now, and it tends to go up every year. But teachers that are new to the Vermont Teacher Retirement System, as of July 1 of 2015, they actually are paying a 1% premium over those folks that were grandfathered before that. And along with that, the employer is charged a flat fee per year to support healthcare costs. So that for next year is going up to $1,509 per teacher. Currently this year it's $1,402. And then the dental rates are also being reviewed by the Department of Federal Regulation right now as well, along with the health insurance rates. They've proposed them to be between 0 and 4%. They have been flat the past couple of years. So I have factored in a 2% increase in the budget that you have before you, just in case we're not really sure where they will go. So moving on, the next section is contracted services. And we do have quite a few contracted service providers in a number of areas throughout the SU. One of the biggest ones is our relationship with New England Center for Children classrooms that we have. So currently we have 3 classrooms at the elementary level. We have 2 at the Mount Anthony Middle School and 2 at the Mount Anthony High School. So each of those is about $200,000, and with that, they are providing teachers and behavior supports, and then we are providing the para supports for those students, which many of them, as I mentioned before, in the salaries, some of them already have become or will be looking to become registered behavior technicians. So we have those factored in. We were notified that because of all the federal money that's coming through the SU, we will be subject to additional single audits, so they will be charging us for those. So I factored that in. We do have, last year we had a contracted social worker, so we factored that in as well because we had it, we paid it out of local. We can't pay it out of a grant going forward because that would be supplanting. So we have factored that into this local budget. And then we're finding, with the social emotional status of, some of our learners that the increased need for clinicians from UCS and or other means. So we've got money in there for those contracts. And then there was a request, actually, I think I have a contract on my desk now for on-site psychiatric nursing. So for real acute needs. So we're providing those services to our students as well. And then on the next page of the narrative, contracted services continues. We'll be transitioning our security services from an employee to a contracted provider next year. So we've factored that in. And then I reviewed the costs for our COBRA benefits administration and what our fingerprinting fees have been for the past couple of years. And both of those warranted small increases for those budgets as well. And while I'm on the contracted service, I mean, this kind of goes along with either a contracted service and or our capitalized software a little bit further down the line. But many of you have heard me talk about eFinance Plus over the past couple of years, and frankly, our disappointment with the capabilities of the system. It does have some reporting deficiencies, lack of internal controls, and I have heard auditors say that we could potentially have a finding just for being on the system because of those lack of internal controls. So there was a committee that has prepared a report, and they will be submitting that to the legislature for the upcoming session with their input as far as what they think about the mandate. And I'm hoping that there will be a legislative change in the upcoming session that will remove that mandate for those of us who followed the law to join eFinance, that will allow us to go to a different platform. I did take the liberty of actually reaching out to our old provider, which was Tyler Technologies, and the product we were using was Infinite Visions. The cost that they quoted me to go back to that was $131,000 a year, plus a $70,000 implementation fee. So I have not factored that into this budget. hoping that there will be, if the legislative session does result in a change to that mandate, I'm hoping that along with that, there might be some financial support for some of those school districts and supervisory unions that decide to change gears.
Can I ask you about security services, Renee?
Sure.
Transition to contracted provider. This is security on our systems. This is security in our building, or both. Are we talking about Vic Milani's?
It is Vic Milani, yes.
And so he will become a contracted service.
Yes. He retired from MAU.
I kind of knew that, but I was confused about whether, because you can't.
We don't want to pay him benefits. So if he's a contracted service, he's going to get his benefits somewhere else. If we kept him on the payroll when he worked that many hours, we would owe him for benefits. So that, which would add to even more of the cost. So that's.
As of right now, you can't cover the police department, the sheriff's department don't have enough.
Correct. And that's why we're asking to increase how many days he works.
For an increase, I had questioned that same thing, but I thought we was gonna wait till the end. But he's saying you're increasing the number of days from him and when he go out on his own.
Right.
Have you ever thought of making some kind of a deal with the Vermont Veterans Home, since they're so close, because they're looking for someone too?
For security, with Vermont's Veterans Home, no.
I mean, contract would be
Yeah.
perfect. You should ask Vic to ask
I'm
them.
not sure he wants to work full time. I don't think he wants to work any more than what he's currently committing to us. But I could certainly have that discussion.
We're almost in the same neighborhood, right? We are in the same
Well, the
neighborhood,
high school is, but
Yeah.
not our other buildings, yeah.
the high school. How about Southwest Tech? Do they, you don't co-join with that?
No. We certainly share services when need be, but he's not their employee.
And we knew that, I thought we were getting something through that shared expense between Mount Anthony and the tech center, and that covered, but it's.
It certainly be.
He helps with the training for them. We offer it to them when we have training, so we don't exclude them, but he's not their employee or their contracted service. You are, as you know, a separate school district, and that is not part of what, Renee, correct me if I'm wrong, but the security wasn't part of the negotiated rental agreement. I know nursing is, but I didn't know if security was. Because Southwest Tech was doing their own detailed offices prior to this too. We didn't pay for that, Southwest Tech paid for that.
I think they have don't they have an ad out for?
Yeah, but that was the question they were supposed to have been answering and contacting, because we thought security joining dealings and so forth, the same type of security things that are being offered at Mount Anthony should have been.
The superintendent of Southwest has not approached me to do anything jointly with him. But I could tell you when Vic is in the building, yeah, I know, but it's not our school. I get told that all the time. It's not our school. It's a separate school.
We're all agreed that it's a separate school, but I'm thinking, and you asked Renee, that there was a percent of fund for something, and I don't know what was in that contract off the top of my head in terms of whether it had.
My understanding was more concerned about maintenance, cleaning, and nursing services.
And roof.
Well, maintenance.
Roof, yeah.
Maintenance services.
Yeah, and that agreement has changed several years ago, that it's just a rental fee now, and we're not actually allocating a percentage of FTEs out any longer. And then just to clarify though, that the security position isn't necessarily a security officer. This is really overseeing the security that we have in place for all of our campuses. So
Evaluations, training of front desk personnel, training on lockdown drills, all that, but he's not the armed guard at the door.
Oh,
Right.
Right, and that's what I know is that, that's why I'm saying I thought that some of the stuff was for him to cover the overall package because we were joined at the hip side. For that kind of stuff, but not the day-to-day things.
well, I understand
Yeah,
what you're, I understand what you're saying. But if Southwest Tech gets someone to do the so-called police thing, overnight, I would hope that we could both save money. Both entities could save money by co-joining for that kind of contract.
Talking
We'll
about
bring it up
police
at the
things
next
overnight?
meeting.
Are we talking about police things overnight?
No.
No, we're not talking about it, police. It's just that, I hate to say it, we hear one thing from the tech center and we're talking about trying to make sure we get some kind of joint agreement or communication.
Mhm.
And you say, well, I'm gonna communicate. And then communication hadn't happened when it came to that, at least to run it through you. And it should be director to director. Superintendent to superintendent to talk about what it is that's gonna happen into agreement because we got campus together. And when they have, I don't know, when you have a lockdown, you have a shutdown of Mount Anthony, they having the same problem on lockdown. So how that communication and all that stuff work together, I got some questions for Mike.
Well, I know Vic is committed, he's also done safety evaluations, even for the village school too. So we're not opposed to sharing the resource, but
Yeah.
they should also count on it too, because his primary focus is the 10 buildings of the SVSU. But in a true crisis, it's all hands on deck anyways, but that's not the purpose of this position. He's not replacing SROs, but it's increase awareness, training, preparation.
Before you go too much further, does contract services include food, Abby?
no, that is funded completely on its own, and it is a self-sustaining program, so there isn't any local subsidy for that.
Okay, I've been approached a couple of times about that, regarding North Bennington's
Right.
interest, and I don't know where that goes.
Well, I was gonna ask those questions later on about that. They used to be looking at my paper. I put down about that in terms of what it included in here on the contracted services, which food services is one, but you're saying it's not.
It's not part of this budget because it's in a completely separate fund. So it generates enough money on its own, so we don't have to have it included in the local budget to support the program.
Is that through the state?
It's a federal program through USDA, yes, but it is administered through the child nutrition programs of the Agency of Education.
So that's the answer to North Bennington.
But I thought that if they were short, we subsidized something. Does that happen anymore? No.
It hasn't happened since I've been in this position, no. But it could potentially. I mean, we did, the state changed the format of the contract, and since we just went out to bid and awarded that contract as of this July, it's a completely different structure and reimbursement model that we haven't experienced before. So we may find, down the road that it isn't as profitable as it once was under the previous method. And then if that were the case, we would be coming to the board and asking most likely for a subsidy. But that remains to be seen, and that has not been factored into this budget before you. So I can
Going
jump back
to safety and security. the variance went up to 238, which is probably the steepest variance that we have. And it went from, it looks like it went down. Well, I don't understand that. It went up. It went from 11,834 to 40,000. And that's because you have a contracted service.
I'm sorry, Jackie, I'm not
Okay,
following.
so
Go
I'm looking at 2660.
Well, you've jumped ahead. I haven't gotten onto that sheet
Oh,
yet.
okay,
I'm still on the
sorry.
category
I thought we
one.
were talking about, I'm sorry, I thought we were talking about safety and security.
That does roll into the contracted services. So the one that I have up now, the budget by category, that falls into that 03 contracted services line.
And so the difference, why it went from 11,834 to 40,000 is because we contracted effort.
Right. He used to receive a stipend through the SU to provide those services. And now, since he's retired and his role is going to be expanding a bit because he's not going to be at the high school anymore, his proposal was to go to a contract for, I believe, $39,000. And then I have $500 in there for supplies and $500 for travel. So that comes up to the 40,000. But if I can get through this this version here, and then I can jump over to that other one, so everybody like just trying to follow along. So the 04 operations, this kind of encompasses everything to operate the SU. So it's utilities for our central offices, repairs and maintenance, and this also includes the buses up in Arlington, equipment leases, the rent that special education pays to Mount Anthony for the use of the building on Congress Street, and then various other examples that I have there. So we do have an increase in janitorial contracted services. We have Janitronics that cleans our central office as well as Division Street and the Molly Stark building. So we anticipate an increase from that service. And then also for fuel and bus repair and maintenance costs up in Arlington. So I have factored those in as well. The drivers, however, for the buses are included in the salary and benefits lines, zeros 1 and 2 that we went over previously. So the next line down, however, is the transportation, and this is just the contracted the contracted portion. So what you're seeing here would be the transportation to and from school, as well as special education transportation and any transportation for students that we have attending out of district day placements. Currently, that's provided by DO4, but we will be going out to bid this year for a new contract effective July 1. So I did factor in a potential increase in that contract. 06 is tuition, and what we have for tuition at the SU level is pre-K, and again, those students that might be attending out of district day placements. So working with Kate and her team in identifying the students, that is what the adjustment that you're seeing there is the difference in what we're anticipating for students to not be out of district next year. The next line down is supplies. So this is supplies for buildings, it's supplies for special education, it's supplies for our psychologists and our occupational therapists. So I've looped all of those together, as well as any online subscriptions or licenses, and anything that has a singleized value of less than $5,000 is actually considered a supply. So if any of you have computers before you, those would technically be considered a supply, not a piece of equipment. So that's where budgets for those would fall. There was a request this year to budget for supplies, as we've found a need over the past couple of years for psychologists, our speech and language pathologists, occupational therapists, and physical therapists. So we did factor in money for all of those. And then, of course, our custodial supplies, everything's increasing, as we all know. And then we have the reallocation of the technology positions to supplies and some equipment based on the initiatives that they're looking at. So that's actually the next line is the equipment. And capitalized software. So any software that we have that's valued over $5,000 annually ends up in that line as well. And then that final line, dues and fees, that is really just based on what we're paying for professional administrator organization memberships. And then the dues to the Vermont School Board Association is assessed at the SU level now, and that has been increasing annually. So with that, Jackie, I'm happy to jump over to that other version that you had before you there. So this is the same information, but instead of looking at those 9 categories of salaries and benefits and, contracted services, it compresses all of those and then breaks it out by the department, by the specialty, by the function, however you want to refer to it.
So I was trying to catch you, Renee, before you, where do you want questions to be? At the very end, or in between, of what? If we had questions, I was trying not to stop you to go in and get some clarification, because I was back on anticipated in the pre-service with the janitorial services, and my question was, would it had something to do with the move from the old building to this building in terms of type of cleaning that need to take place is where we're getting an increase from those guys.
The cleaning company did come back and wanted to charge more for cleaning this space, and I pushed back on them, saying that the space is actually smaller and we have fewer restrooms. So they kept it level for this year. But I know, they're seeing increased costs for, their staffing as well. So I anticipate that they're going to be coming back at me for next year for more money. I'm sorry, Leon, does that answer your question? I'm coughing a little bit, so I wasn't catching everything you were saying. Okay. So on your packets, if you move to the ones that have the little yellow highlight on them, so the chart is SVSU total expenditures by department or specialty. And then the narrative is by function. And I will actually try to label those so they're aligned for next time. Let's see, just share my screen again. So on your narrative, there are several things that are going to be consistently, a factor in each of these. So the collective bargaining agreement. So any of these categories or these functions that have teaching staff, we already know what that impact is. We know what the benefits are going to be, or what we've budgeted for. So we're going to see that in every one as well. So that's just a common note that I have there at the top of the narrative. But then we get into direct instruction 1101 is the function code. This includes the local paraprofessionals. So those are the ones that get directly assessed to the elementary schools. And then there's still one at the middle school and one at the high school, I believe, Mount Anthony. And then the paras that are at the local paras in Arlington are included in their local budget. So in this category, we have the interpreter, as well as the 6 new paraprofessionals that were requested by the elementary principals. And we have level funded the pre-K tuition for next year. 1201, special education. This is direct instruction for special education for early ed, elementary, and secondary levels. So this is where you're going to see that teaching staff, the paras, the registered behavior technicians, but then also the contracted services that we have for the clinicians from UCS. Our agreements for our partner programs, partner classrooms from New England Center of Children. We did transition one teacher of the deaf, which is, I think, 2151, the hearing impairment code. That has been transitioned to a special education teacher. So that is contributing to some of the change that you're seeing there. And then the registered behavior technician tier of salaries. Also included in that would be the tuition for our out-of-district placement. So that overarching is what's contributing to the reduction there. Many of these are just going to be, updates to the salaries and benefits. And again, this is just kind of splicing and dicing the information a different way. I'm happy to go through it all, but I know that you guys have already been here for 45 minutes. So I don't know if there's anything that's kind of jumping out at you that you would like to discuss or go into further detail about.
One of the questions I always have is many of the special education requirements are directed by the AOE, and also a lot of it is funded by the state and federal government. So when we look at this budget, does that include what our share is, or does that include the total amount that it costs and then we get refunded?
You're looking at the total expenditures. So that's what we have before you. So when we actually have that offsetting revenue, that's what we'll see on the assessment spreadsheet, which I'll have for you next month. I'm hoping that we get some additional information from the Agency of Education. They typically give us some information as to what we can expect for reimbursements for early essential education. And then this is the first year of the census block grant change and how they're funding special education. So Brad James did give us a calculator on that last year, because it's basically the census-based model is giving us a flat dollar figure per student, and that's averaged over a long-term average of average daily membership of the previous 3 years. So he has all of that data along with what that rate is going to be. So hopefully we'll be getting that from Brad in the coming days to be able to calculate that offsetting revenue. And then, of course, we actually just got, I think it was last week, the AOE finalized their FY22 reconciliation. And so we'll be able to calculate any fund balances or deficits that we had from FY22 that we would have to factor into FY24. So that'll all roll into the assessments. But what you have before you today is just the total expenditures.
So Renee, what I'm looking at, of course, is the bottom line, 4.43.
Mhm.
And so can we anticipate that will be lower?
Not for your expenditure budget, no, but what you're actually seeing that's rolling into the local budgets, it's really going to depend on the function. So some of these functions, we may find that they were overspent in FY22, so we'll have to make up some ground, and then others will find that, there may have been slight over budgeting, so we'll have a surplus that we can apply to the FY22, to the FY24 expenditures.
So when do we see the reimbursement? After we set the budget, and then the reimbursement comes next summer? And so we've already put out for a 4.43 increase?
I'll be able to roughly estimate for you what we anticipate for revenue at our next meeting, which I'm hoping will be in early January. Sorry.
So I'll go back to my first question. Can we anticipate a lower percentage of increase?
Unless something changes in the core part of the budget.
No, I don't think we're gonna see, but I haven't run those numbers yet.
So Renee, when, for the next meeting, will you have details under each of these budget categories for us? I mean, these sheets are nice, but they don't necessarily tell me anything, and they don't tell us anywhere that we can value engineer the budget.
I typically haven't gone into that level of detail. If there's a direction that the board would like me to go in, I would go back to the directors to make cuts.
I mean, this is nice, but I can't make any educated decisions regarding it because I don't have any detail behind it.
Would you want the, I mean, it's easy enough on the pivot tables to break down the function and then give you all the categories underneath that.
That would be a
It
good
gets-
place to start.
I don't know, maybe this is Matt's first cycle through this. You get much more granular when it comes to like the ESD budget and the MAU budget. And those boards do, say value engineer, but do push and pull on certain parts of it.
Mhm.
That has not typically been what has happened on this board. Is that? I mean, what each of those other boards do will impact what this final number is.
Yes.
I mean, we always do that from the school district.
But I don't want the, as the,
But we
as an
always do
elementary
that.
school board member, I don't want this board value engineering what the elementary school district needs.
I
That's not the
understand
role.
that, but there are still SU expenditures here that I think we need to know what those all are to make educated decisions and see if there is an opportunity to value engineer anywhere in that. I mean, all of our districts are paying an assessment to the SU, and that's based off the budget.
Not only that, but they don't get to vote on it either.
Correct.
Well, exactly.
So it's it's our responsibility to make sure that this is as tight and, for us to say that's, 162,000, but I don't know, what is that money really going to? I'd like to see the details behind it. Whatever it might be, any of these individual line items. Not seeing the details doesn't help me at all. It could have been an email.
And I was trying to ask some of the same type of questions. I'm going back to the example when we talked about security, and that's an SVSU thing.
It is, and I
over,
think
I'm-
your questions, if we had the details, you would be able to make educated decisions around that, or maybe answer your questions a little bit better.
What's that covering for everybody?
Absolutely.
Not covering. The individual things where you may have a para that you need a local school and so forth, those are gonna pass through and so forth. And so I'm trying to split those out and not judge anything that anybody else is gonna have in another district. But I wanted to make sure that the overall cap of the SVSU level is sufficient enough or not sufficient enough so that we can understand those dollar values is what we're putting into the overall umbrella cap. Whether they need to be changed or something else need to happen associated with those things.
What kind of detail are you able to add to this, Renee, before your next presentation?
I mean, it's always been my goal not to bury people with the minute detail, but to put it in a format that's understandable and hopefully provide enough detail and background as to, what's driving the changes, to allow you as the decision makers to do that. But I mean, you're looking at a budget that has over 3,000 lines of detail, so that would be boatloads of paper that nobody wants to go through, but it's my world, right? And that's what you pay me to do. But I can kind of combine the two, which would be something that you haven't seen before at this board level. But for instance, looking at the department / specialty type layout, if you wanted to see, for the direct instruction, what exactly the salaries are for that category. For that function, along with, the benefits, and that would be easy enough to do. But it is going to be a lot more detail and paper before you to study, and I can certainly provide that. It's not a problem at all.
The kind of thing you're looking.
That's what I'm looking for. Yeah, to start.
It's like we used to do that. We used to
I
do
do it
that.
all the time.
And, well, it wasn't very, it didn't clarify anything, of course, was really good.
I mean, you don't have to print it out, you can send it to file. It's easy enough to look at, so.
Sure.
Renee, I have a couple of questions that came up after our local budget presentation.
Mhm.
And so some of these, I think, I had asked if I could follow up with you. Some of them may be too local for this group. But there were some positions that were previously funded out of the SU that are being moved to the local budget. And some of the rationale for that, I understand. And then there were some positions, at least one position that was an add. It was not a transfer of funding, but it was an add to the local budget for a function that sounded like it would have really been an SU expense. So it has prompted me to think and probably have more questions about how those determinations get made, what the assessment is out to the Arlington district. You mentioned direct assessment charges versus, I assume, more of a cost share across all districts. This is our second budget cycle, probably first full functional budget cycle. And I'm just finding that I still have questions about how it all works. And the difference really is that we were a self-contained ecosystem before, like we managed all of our own expenses. And we've moved into a much bigger world, and I'm not entirely sure still how it all works and how it impacts our local budget. I know we're paying more in assessments than we were paying to run the BVSU. So from a taxpayer standpoint, I would want to make sure that I can answer questions about where we've gained services. Have we looked at places where we have redundancies, things that we're still funding locally that are also coming through the SU? I don't know if this is the place to ask those questions, Renee, or if that's something that I can sit down with you. It may just be a lack of knowledge at this point that I just don't have on how all of that works.
No, and Nicole, you're absolutely fine, because this is a really big budget.
Yeah.
And it's, comprised of so many different departments. I think when we got into the assessment discussion last year, there were several different scenarios that I was requested to run, and it, maybe was just a little too much information for some. But I think when we get into that again next month, that might help. But you're absolutely correct that there are some segments of the budget that we do allocate out based on a proportion of our equalized pupils as a whole SU. But then there are direct assessments specifically for, like, say, special education. We track all of those costs directly by a separate fund and by those personnel associated with those funds. So I can make sure that I'm not having any one district pay for somebody else's, special education teacher, for instance.
Right. But along those lines, so one of the positions that was added to the ASD budget was for a reading teacher, which in a sense, if I understood correctly, is actually more of a reading interventionist. And so I guess that's two questions. What, are we not getting the services that are needed as a reading interventionist out of the SU staff that would prompt for hiring that locally? And if so, why? Like, why are we having to hire somebody local if that service really should be coming through the SU? And along those same lines, I think we still have, I don't think, we still have a local technology person in our ASD budget, but we have the contracted service for technology at the SU level. So are we paying for things twice to get what is needed? And if so, why?
Yeah, so as far as technology goes, I've been working with SUSER IT and looking not to demolish local budgets, but rather look to see what's contained in those local budgets with the initiatives that they're looking to put in place over the next couple of years. And it'll probably be a combination of money that we have at the SU level, but then using the local budgets, technology budgets, to be able to support specific buildings while overall improving, network capabilities and Wi-Fi access and so on and so forth. So that's really their realm, but they just ask that I not, touch their budgets. And you are correct that your technician is still locally budgeted, and we could certainly pull his employment and everything up into the SU, or we left him as is for the next budget cycle.
Yeah, and a lot of it may make sense, and there may be rationale for it, and I'm just not sure that I completely understand the history or the reasoning behind.
Yeah, it's all new. We're all still trying to figure it out.
So what is the right, if I come up with a list of questions, specific questions, what is the right format or forum for asking those questions?
I don't know, Jim, do you have a recommendation? I'm happy to answer questions, but I know it might benefit, the greater board as well. So
Is that
if you want-
something you can put together?
I think if you submit those suggestions to Renee and CC to me,
Okay,
and then when we schedule our January budget meeting,
great.
that we can make sure that that's.
Yeah, I don't want to catch anybody off. Some of it may take some research and some of it may require some looking into, and
I
I want to be
always
respectful
appreciate it when
of
somebody
Renee's
gives us
time.
the stuff in advance so we
Yeah.
can answer intelligently.
Yeah. Okay,
If she
Or at least attempt to.
that's collating all this stuff, she isn't answering the same question 6 times.
Yeah.
So if she gets it in advance, with the detail that Matt is looking for, that would help fill in some of your.
Great.
Does that work for you, Renee?
yes,
this is another just kind of random question. Do you ever look at the SU budget more on a cost per pupil, like as the member districts are shrinking in enrollment, but our SU costs are increasing? Have you looked at it historically at that level?
I haven't, because I haven't had any consistency since I've been in this position. It's like we get a new curveball every year or 2 years. So I'm waiting for the year where I have one that's the same as the previous to be able to start being a little bit more proactive.
The only thing I thought we did when we looked at was the umbrella in terms of adding FTEs for the person at the SVL level, because it wasn't a requirement to be used so much, but most of it lately has been going the other way, that we having to add more. FTEs for a position at the SBS level because that person is having to go out and do more supportive stuff along that line. So lately we hadn't went the other way because once you put a person in that position, you got a base salary
Sure.
position for that, unless they can't cover all the requirements in which those, when we were looking at it, the law that says that each student's supposed to have so much time or contact from that particular individual, and if they can't do that, that's why we had to add.
Sure, yeah, and that makes sense, and I think what prompted me to think about is when I look at I look at our local budget, Renee, the information that you presented on what our anticipated sort of cost per pupil basis is it's going up significantly. And $400,000 of our increase in budget is coming from monies that were SU monies that may have still been assessments out, but now they're in the local budget. So it as I'm looking at cost per pupil at our local budget, it made me wonder if that has been looked at the SU level. Because I don't know any school districts that are growing exponentially.
Right.
But there's still increasing administrative costs to run
Here's what
SU.
I gotta close this link and open the other link, so.
Well, I was just gonna say, if we,
I'll
without throwing water on this, can we
write questions
put our
down.
questions down
Yeah.
and get them to Renee in advance?
Will do.
We can do that. We have another meeting to run.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you, Renee.
thanks, Renee.
Yeah.
Thank you for dealing with my voice.
Renee, you gotta close this meeting. You're the host of it.
So, right,
Supervisory Union for December 20th. Very quickly, the agenda reads as follows. Item 1 is public comments. 2, finance and operations, which will include the treasurer's report. There are 3 policies we're asked to warn this evening. The consent agenda includes minutes, warrants. There is 1 retirement, nominations, resignation, superintendent's report, chair's report, any other items to be brought before the board without formal action. And for your information, the budget status report, student enrollment, and information on 2 policies that don't need any particular action, just for the information of board and public. There are minor changes. If the agenda is okay with everybody present, sure. We'll move into item 1. Is there any public make a comment? See any up there?
Don't see any hands raised from anybody joining on Zoom.
So we'll move to finance and operations. We have a treasurer's report for November 2022. Would you like to accept the report? Is there a motion? So moved. We have a motion and a second. From Scott Leon. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No abstentions? Motion carries. The report is accepted. We have 3 policies. Number 2200, non-discrimination. Number 5087, threats and disruptions to school operations. 5405, behavioral intervention. Whereas to warn each of them. Any comments?
Separately would be great. I'll just, policy 2200, the district is to ensure that no one discriminate on the basis of race, color, religious, national origin, sexual orientation, marital status, gender, identity, ancestry, place of birth, or age, or mental or physical disabilities. This policy was updated to reflect all of the new and current requirements of the Department of Education and so forth, with the titles associated with that. So I would just ask that we an address for this new location is here. So we approve this particular policy for
Is that
Warning.
Warren?
Yeah.
Second. We have a motion from Leon. Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No abstentions? Motion carries. 2200 is warned. 5087 threats.
Yes, this policy, the school districts is to respond quickly and effectively to any threats of safety of its students or staff. It gives the certain provisions and so forth along that line. And here several different things that gave definitions. It also is a big policy that encumbers quite a bit. But then one of the things I wanted to point out that on the second page that it says, talk about if suspensions may exceed 10 school days, a school board hearing must be conducted within the 10 school days from the precipitating action. Some change, the updates or highlights in there. The other part of it on page 3 that everybody really needs to be aware of, that this policy requires that the dissemination copies of this policy should be included in all schools' handbooks for staff, for parents, for students that contain the following provisions that talks about the rights of their things to be searched by the district, law enforcement, and so forth, based on the Department of Education federal law. And so this is very important. They needed to be aware of those particular items. So I ask that we warn this policy as it is written with that synopsis.
That's your motion? Is there a second, Leon's motion?
Second.
Second by Jackie. Further discussion? Great.
The item about number 2 in section 5, sanctions, it's suspension, if the suspension exceeds 10 school days, hearing within 10 school days. Are those the same 10 school days? Or is that's from the incident, not necessarily the suspension period?
It's precipitated from the event when it occurred 10 school days, that which is practically.
And there's a schedule of who determines that it's going to exceed 10 days?
Determine if it's going to exceed 10 days. It goes to the school board.
Yeah, but the school board doesn't actually.
Suspension is usually
Should be
handled by the
discussed
principal.
elsewhere. I'm sorry, I'm just confused by why it's written that way.
The suspension is going to count, Jemison. It's the principal, but it says if you're going to do that for more than 10 days, they need to go to the superintendent and the board needs to approve the extension of the suspension for some period of time.
I think it's the same 10 days.
Yeah, I would think that's what
Yeah.
I'm thinking, so. But it's not clear from what it's stated. So.
Yeah.
We all,
All right.
okay, but if you got it for North, anytime you want to have something else and make it be clear, it'll come back. You can send that on.
Well, actually, yeah, you can go. I think that's a minor change.
Yeah, so it can keep going.
Lawyer, could change the wording a little bit without changing that thing.
You guys are going to be working on this. Go.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right, it's gonna, this is a warning, so I'm saying this is a time, if there's something that you think need to be clearer, and we want it to be clear,
We should change it now.
you can send that, it won't be you can make the recommendation so that it go back to the policy committee to talk about the change.
And probably the lawyer will be able to work out.
I think it was the lawyer who wrote it.
Well,
It makes sense to me, but
it did to me, but if something, I'm saying, this is what, when it gets to everybody, everybody has a different opinion or version of something. And to get that to us, we can evaluate that and determine whether we
The
want
first
to make.
time I read it, it made sense to me. This time it popped that, you know, maybe it wasn't that clear. Sounds like we'll be discussing that. Any
Okay.
further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of warning this policy, signify by saying aye. Opposed or abstention? The policy is warned. 5405, behavioral intervention.
Yes.
Warned.
This policy, students are not subjected to unreasonable use or restriction, behavior, or intervention, and there are to be no common understanding within the SVSU. And that is member districts appropriate intervention by the district staff. It's mainly in this policy, and it's short, and somewhere we had a lot of discussion about education rule 4500 is really, really thick. And we referenced that in here, and it covers everything. That rule should be referenced here, but it should be so that the people that are responsible for performing the intervention or the restrictions need to understand and read that. And if a parent or somebody wanted to get it, they can refer to that rule, but it would be a big, big book associated with the training of that individual. So I urge you to warn this policy as it is presented today. Well,
That's your motion?
yes.
We have a motion from Leon. Is there a second?
Second?
Second from Jackie. Further discussion? Being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Being none, 5405, behavioral intervention is warned. The consent agenda, including minutes, warrants, there are no leaves, retirements, resignations, nominations. Do we have a motion?
So moved?
Motion from Jackie, second.
I'll second it.
And second by Leon. Discussion.
Since I just signed a couple of letters, I would just note that the retirement, given the length of tenure, probably warrants a letter of thanks.
I was gonna ask
Yeah.
that Sally Bisaccio was 24 years.
Yeah.
Deserves some,
Definitely deserve.
recognition for that. We're keeping you busy, aren't we?
Actually, Katie is just phenomenal. I will sing her praises. Thank goodness for Katie West.
I hope she's listening. Otherwise, we'll pass the message on.
And I'll work with her on getting a letter out for that one.
And just a minor note, where it says on the minutes, board members present. Matt Falkowski, ASD, Dick France, Chair, SVU, ESD. I'm not the chair of the elementary school district. SVSU, and that's more. For Richard benefit. Any other discussion on consent agenda? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? None. Consent agenda is approved. Superintendent.
Last month, I spoke to you, I told you that we were actively pursuing an alternative site for interventions to help some of our neediest students, particularly to regulate behavior. At last week's Union Elementary Board meeting, we asked about the reuse of central office, the Beach Street School, first floor only. The second floor, the bottom floors cannot be used for anything other than storage. Little history, the Union Elementary Board did try to market the building. As a reminder, there are restrictions on the open space of that building on the land. And we did recently learn from our attorney that the land cannot be subdivided. That was one of the plans. If we would be possible, the Union Elementary District would retain ownership of the open land that has to remain open in perpetuity, forever. That there is a mechanism to remove that restriction, but it requires, square foot for square foot replacement of that open space somewhere else. So really kind of an impossibility. Scott led that ad hoc committee that really tried to do something with the building, but I think we found a new need for it. I've asked Dr. Abbott to be here this evening to speak to you and any of your questions about what we're going to use this building for. And we will be early January coming back to the Union Elementary Board for a final approval. But we have taken some preemptive work to paint the interior of the building and replace the carpet to get it ready for student use. And we had the Bennington Building Commissioner tour the building. It's safe to use. The fire alarm system needs to be recalibrated. That is going to happen. We desperately need this location. Dr. Abbott, would you want to come forward and talk to what we hope to use the building for, how many students eventually will be there, how we're going to staff it or attempt to staff it? That's one of the bigger challenges right now.
So we have a small population at many of our buildings of children that really have a hard time staying regulated in the school building for a number of reasons. Sometimes it's they struggle with being around peers. Sometimes they've made a threat to harm someone else. And so we have to continue their education at another location because they still have the right to an education. But to keep everyone safe, we sometimes need to separate them from the larger group of students while we sort through, create safety plans and help the student kind of stabilize. So the concept of this alternative site would be an intervention site where children could access clinical counseling as well as instruction. And we were looking at about 15 students. We have the majority of students right now that are middle and high school age. We have about 10 who are in need of this type of a placement and 5 for elementary. We currently have a high school teacher and paraprofessional, elementary special educator, and an split middle elementary special educator in our staffing pool to work on staffing this. We have traveling clinicians so that we could provide that support and service there. And we recently signed a contract with UCS to provide some additional services and that we can deploy in a variety of sites. So the hope would be a small population of the high school could also stay on track for graduation at this site as part of the 15 through credit recovery and proficiency-based learning activities to help them stay on track for graduation if they're having difficulty with that. So basically, this would be a smaller, separate site that would allow us to regulate some learners, keep them on track towards graduation, and keep the larger school populations kind of regulated while these children are kind of working out some issues that they have to be able to return to a larger group setting.
I do feel that I hesitate to use the word emergency situation, but we are, we're struggling in some of our elementary schools and our middle school and high school to find appropriate placement for some of these learners. And On Point, you've heard us talk about On Point, it's at capacity. There's not putting other additional students there. So this is a resource that we need. I don't need really any action from the board tonight, but I want you to know that this is the project that we're pursuing to create additional resources and interventions for these learners, and hopefully it will help regulate some of the behaviors that we are experiencing in some of our schools.
I'd like to commend the creative thinking. As a member of the elementary school board, I've heard from parents who don't want to deny any child an education, but are finding that keeping these kids in the current setting is denying their child an education because of the disruption. And they're kind of at their wits' end. So, hopefully it's a process for them to be able to move through it and get back into learning with their peers. But
Anyone who would go to this intervention, there's always an entry and an exit criteria for anyone's entrance, because the last thing we want to do is, someone goes off there and just stays there, right? That's not appropriate. And our goal, and I mentioned this at the Union Elementary Board, is to keep this as local as possible. Because if On Point's full and we have a severely dysregulated student, our only option is to contract for them to go to a private setting. And the challenges in Vermont is that there's nothing local. And so we're putting a student on a bus for an hour each way every day. And we've had to do that before. So that makes the transition back to their sending school, because they do remain students from their sending school. They're still a student at, Shaftesbury or Pownell or Bennington or whatever, but any of our schools, there's still a student there. But there's, as I said, there's strongly drafted entry and exit criteria. And I do want to commend Dr. Abbott for all the time that she's put in to make this happen, and to our director of facilities and operations. I'm so glad that we now have that position so that Holly could really jump on that with getting first the building inspected to see if we could even pursue this option. And the answer came back yes, and actually that it's not as expensive. Long term, we might have to look at other things. There's issues with that building long term that may have to be addressed. There's no leaks in the roof, but everybody knows the roof is up. And we will keep communicating with you about how long this may be, whether that if this ever becomes, we decide based on the volume that it has to become a permanent intervention, then that's a whole other discussion about what we'll do with this building. But the good news is the building will be occupied. It will not be an empty, vacant building, subject to all the issues and problems that could be with that. And I'll be back with it'll be, how do we pay for this? Well, MAU will be paying for some of this. The Union Elementary School District will be paying for some of this, just like it would have to but it will be considerably less expensive than if we had to outplace any of these students.
Can I ask two questions?
Absolutely.
The last time I was there, I noticed there was a swing set. So is that going to be removed or
No,
updated?
That's required under that open land, Jackie, and that field being mowed, and that's all part of that open
So would it be
agreement.
updated too?
That I don't know yet. I know we are looking at our playgrounds at some of our other elementary schools about making them upgraded, make them more accessible. If we're there long term, certainly
They look
that may be
dangerous
possible.
the last time I
Yeah.
looked at them. And then my other,
Sorry, Jackie, you know what you said?
I said they look dangerous.
All right, the seats and chains were
We're good.
recently updated, but
Well, they didn't have me on them.
because they have been maintained by the Union Elementary District, and prior to that by the Bennington School District, because it was part of that they had to remain there. The open field has to remain there.
Okay,
And I'm told that there's even walking trails out back.
yeah, I mean, it's such a great spot for what is being described, because it's quieter. There's outdoor space, outdoors heal. I think there's so many creative things that could be done with that property to help serve the needs of these kids.
if the second question that I had was, what about suspended students? Could they go there instead of going to get tutoring, as we discussed a little while ago?
Well, I would say anything's possible, right? And let's see what the student count comes down to and who are our neediest students for the suspended student may be able to be continue to be handled at the tutorial center. And it's all going to depend on the need of regulation, right? And what they're suspended for. Dr. Abbott, do you have anything to?
I mean, we work.
You're the specialist in this.
Yeah, we work really closely with Tutorial Center, and so either sometimes children will go to Tutorial Center, sometimes Tutorial Center will come right to our buildings, as long as the building the child is in is not the building which they're banned from. So I think that's a great idea, is thinking
And
about
United
how-
Counseling also is a partner.
Yep. And we have both,
But they were all struggling the same thing as staffing.
Yeah, so we're really shuffling like some of the resources that we have to cover the needs in smaller groups. We're programming for one-on-one for many of these children right now.
I think it's a wonderful idea.
I would piggyback on Scott's more eloquent statement. You have thoughts on that. But one little question that I probably shouldn't ask is, if the elementary system acquired that school that used to be Benell's, what kind of legal mess happens when the SVSU?
The SVSU will not, you can't own property. So it remains the property of the Union Elementary School. What we may have to do is come into once again, a rental agreement with them, like we have with MAU for On Point. MAU owns the On Point building, and we pay rent to them, and then, so the SU would, if this goes on long-term, we'll be paying rent and operating costs for that building.
It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Well, it's much less than sending them away.
No.
The transportation alone for one student could pay the heating bill for that building for the year, so.
When we talked a lot about a lot of the intervention services at the last meeting, I think the next day Digger had a so fantastic article about what's going on in Bennington and some of the behavioral issues. I don't know if a program like this, being creative and innovative, trying to meet the needs of the students, is something that could be presented from a marketing and communication standpoint, because you're doing good things to try to address the needs of the students in the community. And instead of letting that, I mean, the Digger article was just not,
Yeah, when it gets up and running, it should not be a secret.
no, that's not what you want. For all the hard work that is being done.
Pros and cons to that.
Because Kate and her staff, and they are being proactive to try, and the principals, and are trying. The
Sure.
principals, when asking for something like this, they are struggling with some of the behaviors that they're seeing in their building. We're always sensitive about how, when we talk about this publicly, because, we don't want to identify anybody, we don't want to
No, you
identify any
can't, but-
school. So we're sensitive, because we also don't want,
I don't know how that article hit Digger's radar. Like, I don't know why it was specifically written about Bennington. It's unfortunate because it's an issue everywhere, in all districts, in all schools.
there's many schools that it could have been written about, but it's certainly,
It would be nice to see a follow-up on what you are doing that's,
and I will talk about that, like, the article, said that I declined to be interviewed, and I should clarify that. When they reached out to us, we asked for a list of questions, and then our response, which was only a fraction of what was printed, we responded to what the questions were that Vermont Digger asked for us. And, we responded probably 3 pages, on 2 different occasions, like 2 pages one day and a 1-page response of a follow-up question the next time. So, we can never control
No.
the narrative of what is being printed, but I am.
and it may be that the author of the article had an agenda.
Yeah.
And chose the questions that, I mean,
But at the same time, I acknowledge that our schools, our students are struggling.
There
A
are
small
needs.
percentage of them,
sure.
because we do look at the data, where we are. We have our director of assessment, Melissa Sandler, does a wonderful job of providing us, along with others that work with her, the data so that we can look at by school, by grade level, where we're seeing, students that need assistance. And I acknowledge it's younger than we've probably ever seen. But, is that COVID? Is that been even longer time coming? Like, I would say the struggles that we see in first grade is probably, for me, the most surprising. But we also have struggles at the middle school and high school with behavior, but that probably shocks people less because, you know, of the grade level involved. But when we hear that it's our younger learners that are struggling and exhibiting behaviors that, you know, that we haven't seen and that do involve calling the police. The police often get called when students depart the building and are, you know, out in the street. You know, that I think has escalated at some of our schools. So getting these learners in a smaller, safer environment that would allow interventions for them to reset, I think is a response, an appropriate response. And so, you know, your point's well taken that we should acknowledge, you know, what we're doing to help respond to this. And it's not, you know, we're not ignoring it. And this has been, you know, in the works. And plus, like, you know, like if you remember, we gave all the boards presentations on all the positions that we have added in schools, like, you know, and then as we're in the budget process, we're seeing our principals asking more, you know, their own.
Counselors.
I think people
Psychologists. Yeah.
outside of education would be really surprised to see how many employees in the buildings are not like classroom teachers. How many, you know, BCBAs and social workers and behavior specialists that, you know, that's where the growth has been in employment, and we're trying, it's competitive to get those positions. And every principal's budget that I've seen this year, that they're all requesting more for help, you know, with behavior. And this is a big start. So
When does it happen?
soon, I'd hope by the end of January for sure.
Second semester?
And you know, it'll start, because of staffing, it'll probably start much smaller than, we're gonna do a tour of the building again tomorrow at noon, right? And basically to do an assessment of what furnishings may be needed, because the first floor's completely been stripped of all furnishing, so it's pretty much empty. Painting contractor in there this week. Carpeting will be replaced next week. So from that point of view, it should be ready to go. I think Holly said the fire alarm's been checked and recertified, or it's going to be, but it's pretty much ready to go. So probably anticipate an early January meeting with the Union Elementary Board to try to work out, you know, details for operation, and then we'll be ready to place the, well, we'll know more after we tour tomorrow and see what we, you know, it may not necessarily be the purchase of all new furniture, like what do we have in other buildings that also can go there too, to at least get it started.
Not that Katie West has nothing else to do, but she came on as the information coordinator. There's a lot of good information in the newsletters that are put out. But if there's a possibility of expanding on something like that for a section of the banner, then it gets it out there if people choose to read it, because I don't think so many have access to newsletters. Just a fun.
I personally like all the after-school advertisements, so to speak, that she included. I think that's wonderful that parents have an opportunity to look at other things instead of just leaving their kids at home.
Well, the other thing that I want to mention too does regard newsletters. So I'm very proud of the newsletter. I think, you know, it really started with COVID. Thank you, Kitty. And then we saw so much value in it. We continued. But we're also tracking like accessibility to that newsletter, and does everybody get it? And the answer is probably not. So what Katie and one of our data people approached me for is they want to, when the next newsletter goes out, they're able to track, you know, how many goes out and what type of responses they get. So they're going to do a project of following up with that newsletter and see like who didn't get it, and there are alternative ways to deliver, you know, that message to people. We're also working on the newsletter becoming a podcast so that people can access the newsletter that way too. So the more ways that we allow that to be accessed, is an improvement. So again, at least two of you have commended Katie. I'll join you on that. She continues to explore ways that we can expand how we get information out to everybody, because not everybody has access to a computer or electronic means. We do print a number of hard copies, but not many, and it just would be to print and mail them out to people would be a challenge.
And we challenge them in getting it.
Yeah. And what is a challenge for us is always having accurate, updated contact information for families. Phone numbers change, addresses change, and there's not always on time updating, and there's a lag on chasing that information for people. That's been a challenge long before this, but now as we use electronic communications even more and more, we look at the issues we had communicating with board members as we changed to systems and emails. So put it over with 3,000 parents. It's even being tough, but they're working on it.
I wonder if the banner would be willing to allocate, so, I mean, I was just looking at their site and all the information that's on the SVSU site, if they'd be willing to partner with Katie on having an education corner or an SVS, like something where
They've
she can
asked,
highlight.
We've asked.
Yeah, for that. So
No.
no, it's in the
No,
process.
it's in the
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's in the.
Katie and I
work at the banner too.
Oh, great.
So we've talked about,
Because I think they wanted me to write a call.
we
and
want you to run a column.
Yeah. So what I offered to do, I think what would be good is that we could do a rotation by department. So like the superintendent will write, and then Dr. Abbott could write once, so on
That would be great.
topics. So that is,
We're working.
it's coming. Yeah, the banner's been very,
The newsletters are really good. They're, the content, the information is really good.
so we basically have an editorial board, like it meets on Wednesdays, like, I think we said tomorrow's meeting is canceled because of the holiday, so.
I do think that Katie too meets weekly with our one of our staff members
She does.
for information, and really good. They're really having they have a really great rapport going on. So
Another source would probably be the chamber, since the chamber covers all the North Shire and South Shire. Maybe a good exchange.
Any questions for, yes.
Well, yeah, this is something I just have, I mean, it's in the FYI category. I mean, all the time, looking at where are our students in the district. And one of the things that we were prepping to keep track of all the time is attendance. And I'm looking at the attendance and I'm saying a lot of them are, I mean, they've been going down in terms of the percentage in the schools, not only just the middle school, the high school, the elementary schools, it's one. How do we get away with
Is that
The
attendance
percentage.
or enrollment?
Who's attendance?
this attendance? How do you get away with that over consistency being out of school along that line? I mean, it's just, it warrants something. I mean, I think he's saying may not be prepared to say anything here today or not, but it's just the numbers are continuously down to having 12 or 13, 14% of some kids out of school on a monthly basis, and I'm saying,
Used to be 91, 93, and now it's below 90,
yeah,
87, 89.
No, I'm seeing in November, 91% was the average attendance for all schools.
for all the schools, yes, you got some that are consistently up, and then you got some that are consistently showing a drop. And so I just wanted to, maybe somebody can take a look and come back. That's something of concern. I'm just trying to find out, what are my students doing? They ain't in school. Whether we're now counting them right again. I know we talked about that one before. that some of them are getting marked absent and they don't get fixed or corrected. All kind of things could happen out there, but
So I could add that as a future, I'm not.
yeah, I know you don't have that.
Some other time, but we could look in
Yeah,
that and maybe even have some principals give perspective too on the schools that like are below 90%. What are they, what are they seeing? And, but I do want to respond. Nicole was asking about why does this show so few students from Sandgate? So I did ask that question. And,
Did I ask that?
didn't you?
Good for me.
No, it might have been Nicole, you didn't. You didn't. It was Celeste who was asking why Sandgate was so low. So, yeah, I just merged Arlington and Sandgate into one
Oh.
report, so sorry.
Okay.
But I know that number is not accurate that is on here for Sandgate. The number is more like 72, but I'm told because this represents what is in Infinite Campus and Sandgate is tracking their students. Similar, like we've had that issue with North Bennington before, that not an accurate number. So it's not accurate for Sandgate either. And Arlington too, Nicole, it's just been recently that we've been able to get everything imported into Infinite Campus from Arlington. So
Yeah.
it remains to be something that needs improvement.
We had a board member ask at our last meeting, he, for whatever reason, was digging into the attendance policy and wondering how the specifics and the admin regulations and what's required, what's stated in the policy and what's happening in attendance. Have we created a required system that is cumbersome, and is it in fact effective?
Yeah.
Those weren't really his words, but
No,
that was my choice to
Yeah.
take from his words.
And I
But
don't want to speculate, but I know one thing that I see from the high school numbers, that a student is marked absent for quite some time before they're actually processed to being like dropping out of school or transferring to the tutorial center. So I'll see this record come across my desk, a transfer card. I signed those. And they're like a month old by the time they get to me. So they're still being carried on the roll, which means that one student's out 30 days before they're removed from the register. That certainly would skew, attendance, but that wouldn't explain what I'm seeing in the middle school.
Yeah.
Anything else I can answer for you this evening?
Do you get a view of total students, call it in the district, but perhaps not in our schools?
In a view in what way, Scott?
Well, so, year over year, private school versus,
are we seeing a skew to more private school?
I just would be curious how that has been impacted by all the things that have happened over the years. It seems interesting that there's many people moving into our area. Many of them have children, but we're not seeing increases of many across the board, increases in the number of students within our schools. So where are they going? Maybe we don't need to know where they're going, but at least having a holistic view of where the youth in the area are getting educated might tell us a few things.
I can inquire on that, Scott. I know that we do get a tracking of all school age attending children. So whether then we can skew that and see where else they're going that wouldn't be one of our schools.
Mhm.
So I could inquire from the finance office does. That's one that does track it. That's how they work with North Bennington, they work with Sandgate for where those students are going for the tracking that way. So whether we can do that, because for them, they need to track where they're going, for them, that's where they're writing the check to. So whether we can look, I don't know the answer of whether, but I can find out of whether I can look at the data and see how many school age attending children are there in, say, the town of Shaftesbury, and how does that equate to how many students are in Shaftesbury?
Yeah, the
Elementary
geek
School?
in me wants to know how many, if you've got if the percentage of youth were being educated at any private institution was 10% 2 years ago, why is it 19% now, or vice versa?
Right. I think conventional wisdom said when we first hit COVID, our numbers dropped. There was definitely more homeschooling, right? And so I could see it, give me some time to try and put that book together. Like, where are we from homeschooling numbers now versus a year ago? And if we can determine, like,
Can we capture private school?
private schools, yeah.
Right.
Well, and it's interesting to read the articles about Grace Christian. They're clearly building a program there. Where are those kids coming from? Are they
And then
coming
the
from?
number that are going further north,
And
Sacred
it's-
Heart.
Franklin still.
Yeah, I know Sacred Heart has, St. Francis has had an uptick too, as well as the Baptist school.
So we know this.
Anything else, Kim?
Make a note, so.
Thank you.
Good. You're all set? I'll try and keep this brief. I think it's worth noting, I don't know where I got this from, but NEASC, the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, sends a group to review the high school in this case. And they were impressed with a number of the programs and services. It's worth noting when we struggle with budgets and hear a lot about problems and challenges that they highlighted on some 14 items that are significant about how well Mount Anthony functions. Safe learning environments and multiple opportunities, counseling and educational support, after school programs, and interestingly, consistent support for the school budget from the community. I don't know where I got it. I can forward it to anybody who wants it. I just thought it was an interesting read, and everybody loves to talk about the negative. This is definitely a positive. An evaluation meeting, those of us on that committee,
Needs to happen.
should be working on some of the things that we've already got for tools. And we probably should get together maybe mid-January or something and put a lot of this together.
Actually, the first week of January is usually more open than the end of January.
Is there,
Probably the day before Renee schedules budget meetings, so.
Oh,
is there,
At least for me, it's open. Except on a Tuesday night.
so getting rid of in January? You want to get as early as the 5th? That's a Wednesday or Thursday?
Goodness gracious, no.
No. Still recovering.
5th, that's Thursday, Friday.
That's a Wednesday, Thursday.
Wednesday would be fine. Wednesday is
The first is Sunday.
Yes,
Yep.
So the 4th is,
fourth is Wednesday.
3 days later, we could meet the following week. I just think
What time? Do we have to meet at night? I mean, are you?
Wednesdays, I'm a driver for just, so I'm not available Wednesday afternoons.
so. That make Thursday a better day?
Well, I have a job.
Yeah, I was gonna say evenings are,
I don't, yeah, those of us on the committee.
I'm not on that committee, so sorry.
include
Yeah, I'm on the committee.
Ray,
Seven.
Nicole,
Is the three?
or,
Four of us?
so if that works, if Thursday works.
Thursday works for me. What time? Do we have to do it at 5? Can we do it in the middle of the day? I'm thinking snow.
January 5th, the Thursday, January 5th.
We don't have anything.
I'm retired, I can do that, but I don't know about Nicole. Right.
Well, I'm thinking of her going back up.
I can participate whenever if I can participate remotely,
Yeah, oh, okay.
so.
I think we can arrange that, can't we, Jeff?
And we don't want to,
No actions, do we have to sign that?
we don't want to keep you after school. So
Well, he doesn't have to come.
Leave one to meet without me.
We just take without it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't have to be here.
Is Scott on it? Are you on the evaluation committee? No.
I think it's just three.
It's,
Well, it would be four of us.
it's the four of us counting me.
Four of us. Who's the fourth?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Four of us. So how about the fifth?
The 5th of January. Thursday. 5th is Thursday?
No. What time?
Well, what time is good for you?
I'm amenable to whatever helps Nicole. Because she's working. Well, I work too, but you know. So, boy, so
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock sounds great. February 5th at 2 o'clock.
30 minutes later, you gotta get to it, that's good.
All right, thank you. And I think Richard got all the attendees, so,
3 o'clock.
the only other thing is, well, is there anything else we want to add to future agendas?
Well, we have to warn that meeting, don't we?
Well, those kind of things will happen, but if there's issues. Okay. And the fixed asset policy and the travel reimbursement have really, really minimal changes where they changed a single number in legal references,
That's what all it was.
and that's it. So that's in. And that exhausts our agenda.
What time did you say on the 5th, so that I can
2
do?
o'clock.
2 o'clock.
and that would be here,
Or remote.
You're with us, Zoom.
remote, and then with a Zoom. Yeah. good. I
We'll
think
book one of the conference rooms.
It's
whichever is open.
Yeah, but no. You would send it to me, you want me to have a copy.
Somebody has a buzzer going off.
Yeah,
Oh, no, I just took it off of airplane mode.
we have exhausted our agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn? So moved.
Oh, sorry.
Sounds like there's a second.